Joining us now is President and Founder at Strelmark, Hilary Fordwich. Hilary, great to see you again. I want to start with what's going on in the UK. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced sweeping changes to Britain's immigration rules, declaring an end to what he calls a failed experiment in open borders. And he's vowing to take back control by tightening rules for work, family and student visas.
That will finally take back control of our borders and close the book on a squalid chapter for our politics, our economy and our country.
Hilary, a few questions about this one. Will people in Britain believe him? There's also the question as to what he's doing to tackle illegal immigration. And of course, there's a question about Reform UK. Is this going to help his chances against Nigel Farage?
Well, pleasure to be back with you again, Gabriella. I think this must go down in history, actually, as one of the largest flip-flops I can really remember. I don't remember a party completely and utterly, yes, going to their opponent's position. And to your very apt point there, really, he's basically running on the reform platform. I think what it is that he's seen what has happened in the US. President Trump ran on closing the border. Of course, during his first administration, he had promised to build the wall. And then when we saw what happened, we all saw and witnessed what happened when the wall wasn't built. And the same thing has happened in the UK, but far worse percentage-wise, with these boats and migrants crossing the English Channel. Could you even imagine, Gabriella, you arriving at customs at Heathrow Airport and asking them where your free 4-star hotel is and where your free housing is and your free meals are and where you're going to move in 6 months? It's ludicrous. No one's ever heard of it.
And the cost to taxpayers is absolutely extraordinary. But just hours before this announcement by Keir Starmer, his home was targeted in a suspected firebombing incident, which is now under police investigation. What more do we know at this stage?
Well, actually, there were two bombs or fires, actually, on the outside of the property. No one was hurt. One was in Kentish Town, one was in Islington, and those are two former properties where he lived. Of course, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister, now lives at 10 Downing Street, but they're properties that he's owned and that he's rented. In fact, in front of one of them previously, some Palestinian protesters were arrested a little while ago. So what we know right now is just that those areas are cordoned off by the Metropolitan Police and they're under investigation. I haven't heard from any sources over there or read anything different or any updates, of course, because it's the middle of the night there right now.
Yes. Well, let's talk about this trade deal between the US and the UK. Donald Trump and his administration inked a major trade deal with the UK, and the deal keeps the existing 10% tariffs in place against UK goods while removing some import taxes on items like steel and cars. Let's just take a listen to Donald Trump.
With this deal, the UK joins the United States in affirming that reciprocity and fairness is an essential and vital principle of international trade. The deal includes billions of dollars of increased market access for American exports, especially in agriculture, dramatically increasing access for American beef, ethanol, and virtually all of the products produced by our great farmers.
Now, this deal was the first trade negotiation signed following Liberation Day, where Donald Trump announced widespread tariffs. What do you make of this deal?
Well, of course, no deal is absolutely perfect, but both sides have benefited. That's why they both signed. Some very interesting things for the UK is that now Rolls-Royce parts will be used in the Boeing engines, which is great for Rolls-Royce, great for the steel industry, and of course the manufacturers and the workers in England. And then the UK bought many Boeing planes, so great for Boeing, great for US businesses. And then with regard to that beef deal, what's very interesting is that it actually is great for the US, of course, US farmers, and the UK is not going to be penalizing or hurting UK farmers because that's beef that was being bought from other countries. So it's not going to hurt the British farmers, which of course was one of the concerns. I think also there's credit due here to RFK because it's his pressure on the whole farming industry to reduce the use of chemicals, which is why this deal also went through, because with the reduction of chemicals, now they're accepting the beef. And also, as President Trump mentioned there, ethanol, that's a huge deal and beneficial, mutually beneficial. And I think for both sides, also 100,000 UK cars without any tariff coming into the US. So mutually beneficial, or neither side would have signed.
Okay, and there's also been a breakthrough in the trade war between the US and China. The United States struck a deal with Beijing after 2 days of negotiations in Switzerland. US Treasury Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer told reporters that the deal had been reached, and Donald Trump described the fresh trade agreement with China as a total reset.
In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the largest structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that, or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs because they don't want to pay 25, 50, or 100% tariffs, so they're moving them back to the United States.
Hilary, you and I have spoken about the art of the deal on this program many times. Is that what we're seeing once again?
Yes, and I think that actually it's really amazing. You just really can't satisfy the left. They're saying, oh, President Trump is capitulating. And then when he imposes tariffs, oh, he's ruining global trade. I mean, you can't please them. But I do think when you say the art of the deal, you're right, because what he had done is he's brought the Chinese to the table. Two other things that are very important with regard to this deal is the Chinese have re-agreed, which they did during his first administration, but then Biden let it go. They've re-agreed to stop the fentanyl manufacturing, because a part of this is a drug deal, stopping those deaths of Americans because of the fentanyl trade, and then also intellectual property. They steal American intellectual property. So those, Gabriella, are two very important parts of this deal. It is only a 90-day agreement, but I think that gives, as he said, President Trump has said, it gives both sides time to iron things out. And again, people can actually be pleased. The stock market, Gabriella, was absolutely delighted.
Absolutely was, reacting pretty quickly to that. Now, we've got to talk about Ukraine and Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has agreed to meet face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Turkey. Now, Zelensky wrote, "We await a full and lasting ceasefire starting from tomorrow to provide the necessary basis for diplomacy. There is no point in prolonging the killings, and I'll be waiting for Putin in Turkey on Thursday. Personally, I hope that this time the Russians will not look for excuses." Now, we know that Donald Trump encouraged Zelensky to accept Putin's meeting. Hilary, I suppose this is another significant step towards peace?
Well, it's a good step, yes. I mean, obviously, when any sides talk, and this is the first time they've talked since over 3 years ago when this war started. One thing that was very negative, though, was that Putin did make a drone strike on Sunday, just last night, again on the Ukraine. I mean, more deaths right at the last minute. So I don't think that was helpful at all. I do think that President Trump is losing his patience, certainly with Putin, and Putin's showing his colors. I think you're right. I mean, it's hopeful. Let's be hopeful. That's all we can be. And Erdogan is going to be, from Turkey, is going to be the mediator here. So hopefully he can get them to come to some kind of agreement.
And there's been some good news coming out of the Middle East. The last American hostage held in Gaza, Eden Alexander, has been released by Hamas after discussions with the US over a ceasefire and a deal to allow humanitarian aid to enter the Gaza Strip. Let's just take a look at those scenes. Cannot even begin to imagine the relief and all the emotion that Eden Alexander and his family would be feeling after more than 500 days being held hostage and finally being returned. Now, the US says that the release is expected to lead to negotiations for the release of additional hostages, and that's certainly another thing we can hope for, Hilary.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this whole situation has been beyond ghastly. I actually have to say, and I'm sure every mother, and you were very touched there, when you hear just the cries and the sounds, this shouldn't happen to any family,
Of
particularly in the
course.
circumstance it did. It was beyond ghastly. So yes, Hamas has said that they obviously are trying. They made this. I think that their statement said that it was a gesture to the U.S. They do want to obviously have more supplies go into Gaza, and they've really been pressured. And again, this comes down to, I think it was also Steve Witkoff has been over there negotiating. He's a tough negotiator, and he's got this release. And kudos to him. Kudos to the Trump administration. This did not happen under the Biden administration. They
No.
weren't working on. I think it's wonderful.
Absolutely. And Hilary, finally, I have to talk to you about the Democrats, because former US President Joe Biden was back in the spotlight last week with an appearance on The View, as well as sitting down for an interview on the BBC. During his appearance on The View, he suggested that Kamala Harris lost the election because of her sex, and alluded to the fact that Americans must just be sexist and racist. Now, his appearance has ignited anger among Democrats who wish that the former president would just ride off into retirement and stay there. Many in his party are just desperate to turn the page on Biden's presidency, craving new leaders, fresh faces, as the Democrats just look to find a way out of the political wilderness. You know, what do you make of Joe Biden's appearance? I certainly agree with the Democrats that are not happy to see Joe Biden coming back and giving his 2 cents.
Well, you're absolutely right, but it's wonderful for Republicans. Let's bring Joe Biden back whenever possible. No, I think he should go back to the beach where he was during most of his presidency. But one thing that's very interesting, actually, some of the discussion I've seen, and I've actually heard from Democrats, and I have Democratic friends, and I know many on Capitol Hill, is that they actually are admitting and lamenting the fact that they don't ever get a chance to vote, that this is all like the elitists, the Democratic elitists give them the candidate. Hillary Clinton was never elected by the Democrats. She did not go through primaries. And it's the same thing with Kamala. And I think that is what is the saddest. Let the people speak. We're in a democracy. And no, the Democratic elitists give their members or their voters the candidate. And hence you've seen these disasters. They need to start learning their lesson.
Absolutely. President and founder at Strelmark, Hilary Fordwich, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. Great to speak with you.
Absolutely. Pleasure, Gabriella, always.